The question is, should our local churches require a particular dress code for the platform? It's a very good question. And my answer is that it really depends on the motive. In the past, in Pentecostalism, we had a theology of the platform or the altar that really differentiated it from the rest of the church building. And in addition to that, we had a theology where the church building is different from the rest of the community. And so things were never done in the church that could be done in your own home, and we did even less things, or we did things more properly on the platform, because that was a more holy space than certainly either the regular church building or outside the church. That is really, in many ways, it's really bad theology, and I'll tell you why. That harkens back to the time in the Old Testament when God dwelt in a certain place. So God dwelt in the tabernacle or in the temple. We have the Holy of Holies where the presence of God is. And when we talked about the altar or the platform being the sacred space, we're really there back to Old Testament theology where God's in a particular place. Of course, we know now, since Pentecost, that God was even then looking forward to a time when He would dwell in us. And that's where we are now. That church building you have is not sacred because it's a church building. That church building you have is sacred because you're there, and you are the temple of the Holy Spirit, as Paul tells us. So when you enter the building, you bring the presence of God with you. And that, of course, applies to the platform as well. The platform is no more of a holy space than the pew, because believers are on the platform as believers are in the pew. We elevate it a little, primarily so we can see better, but it's no more holy. So if that's why we're instituting a dress code, because the presence of God is somehow richer on the platform, that takes us back to the Old Testament. In reality, the presence of God is now in all of us. We sing, "This is holy ground, we are standing on holy ground." That's true. But it's not true because God has just drawn near. That's true because God now lives in every one of us who are believers. The presence of God, the third person of the Trinity, lives in me, so where I stand is holy ground, and wherever I stand becomes holy ground. In the church building, outside, it's holy ground because I've stood there and the Holy Spirit dwells in me. Now, it's possible a church board institutes a dress code for another reason. Not because of a theology of presence, but because they're looking for a little more professionalism for those who are participating, or they're looking for a little more modesty. Because of an elevated platform, sometimes requirements for modesty are important because of vantage points, and so it may be that that's what's behind it. In that case, I would suggest that's entirely up to the local assembly. If you want your platform to look a little better, if for reasons of modesty you want people to dress a little more proper, then that's certainly within the purview of the church board. We would remind everybody, of course, that while we wish to do our best before God, we'd want to be very careful that how we dress and how we act when we come together for worship is not so formal or so proper that people from the community would feel uncomfortable among us. Younger generations in particular don't own dress clothes. They don't wear them anymore. And so we would want to be very careful that in our desire to wear our best before God, we still maintain an atmosphere where somebody from the community could join us in whatever clothes they're comfortable in and would feel completely relaxed among God's people and in God's presence. Because as we know, God told Samuel, the Lord doesn't look on the outside, He's looking at the heart. And you can dress a pretty dark heart in very nice clothes, and God still sees through it. Conversely, you can have people dressed very casually with a wonderful heart towards God, and that's what He sees as well. So I hope that answers your question.